Here is the thing about Social Security. Age 62 is where the government opens the door, and a lot of people walk through it without really understanding what they are trading away. But here is the uncomfortable twist. Waiting is not automatically the smart move either. That is what makes this decision so maddening. Every financial advisor has a neat answer. Every calculator gives you a crossover point. Every online debate turns into a tribal war between take it early and enjoy life and delay until 70, because math. The truth is more irritating than either camp wants to admit. The math is real, but the math is not simple. And the decision is not only about math, it is about life expectancy, inflation adjustments, your spouse, your portfolio, taxes, market conditions, and whether the years when you can actually enjoy the money are in front of you or behind you. That is why I want to walk through 7 reasons filing at 62 can make perfectly legitimate sense. Not because it is always right, not because waiting is foolish, but because the standard advice is usually too clean for the actual problem. Let me give you the central image first because I think it helps. Think of Social Security like a faucet. You spent your whole working life paying into the system. Every year you wait before claiming, the pressure behind the faucet builds. If you wait until 70, you open it with maximum pressure. The monthly flow is stronger, but it is still your faucet. If you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water never gets used. It simply stays in the pipe. You do not get refunded for being patient if life cuts the timeline shorter than the spreadsheet expected. That is the whole argument in one sentence. When do you open the faucet? Now let us build the structure underneath the question. Suppose we have a fictional retiree, call him Professor Pat. Pat earned about $90,000 in his final working year. That is a realistic upper middle class income. Under the sort of numbers used in the source material, Pat can claim at 62 and receive about $2,238 a month. If he waits until full retirement age around 67, for most of the people watching, he gets about $3,198 a month. If he delays all the way to 70, he gets about $3,966 a month. So what do most people do? They run the classic break. Even analysis, take the smaller check for more years or the bigger check for fewer years, add up the totals, find the crossover age, decide from there. That is the standard method, and it is not useless. It is just incomplete, because the whole model hangs on one variable you do not control. How long are you going to live? That is the whole game. The Social Security Administration's actuarial assumptions for someone who has already reached 62 are not the same as life expectancy at birth. If you have made it to 62, the system assumes you will likely live longer than the raw headline number people throw around casually. Run that against Pat's example, and the answer gets slippery very quickly. Under one life expectancy assumption, claiming at 62 can produce more total dollars than waiting until 67. Shift the expected lifespan by a few years and the recommendation changes, shift it again and it changes again. That is the first thing I want people to understand. There is no clean universal answer because the answer moves with your life expectancy assumption, and your life expectancy assumption is one of the least precise numbers in the entire analysis. Now add the thing a lot of people leave out when they do these comparisons. COLA, the cost of living adjustment, a lot of break. Even discussions pretend COLA is zero because it makes the arithmetic easier, but Social Security is inflation, adjusted, and that adjustment compounds off your base benefit. That matters a lot. A 3% annual increase on a $3,966 benefit is very different from a 3% increase on $2,238. Once you bring realistic COLA assumptions back into the picture, the difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 can get dramatically larger over a full retirement. That is why simplistic, take it early and invest it, arguments often leave me cold. They usually leave out the inflation, adjusted nature of the higher delayed benefit, and the fact that the bigger base keeps compounding year after year. So before I give you the 7 legitimate reasons to file at 62, I want to make one thing clear. This is not a morality play. Early claimers are not reckless. Delayers are not always wise. The right move depends on which forces are actually present in your life. Now let us go through the 7 reasons. Reason number 1, your health is genuinely bad, or your family history is telling you something you would be foolish to ignore. This is the most obvious reason, and people still feel strange saying it out loud because it sounds like they are making a morbid bet against themselves. But that is not what is happening. If your father died at 73, your grandfather died at 71, you already had one serious cardiac event, your knees are wrecked, or you have a condition that meaningfully narrows your realistic window, then pretending you are the average actuarial case is not prudence. It is denial. In that situation, waiting for the larger benefit may simply mean waiting for money you will never collect enough of. Open the faucet now. That is not pessimism. That is using a system you paid into while you still can. Reason number 2, you want to enjoy retirement while you are physically capable of enjoying it. This one gets dismissed as emotional, and I think that is lazy. It is not emotional to admit that money at 63 is not the same thing as money at 79. Retirement spending usually follows a curve, higher in the early go years, lower in the slow go years, and lower still in the no-go years. That is not some poetic theory. It is how people actually live. The years when you are most likely to travel, take on projects, see family more often, and spend on experiences tend to be earlier, not later. A larger check at 70 is only superior if your life at 70 is actually able to use it. Your mobility, your health, or your ambitions are strongest at 62, then the value of the money is different. The dollar amount is not the only thing that matters. The timing of your ability to use it matters. I have seen too many people delay everything in the name of optimizing, only to arrive at the larger check with a much smaller life. That is not good planning. That is a spreadsheet victory and a human defeat. Reason number 3. Your spouse can unlock spousal benefits when you file. This is where Social Security stops being an individual decision and becomes a household coordination exercise. If your spouse did not work long enough to build a strong benefit, or if their benefit is much smaller than yours, they may be eligible for spousal benefits worth up to 50% of your full retirement age benefit. But here is the catch. They generally cannot access that spousal benefit until you file. That means your filing decision is opening or delaying an entire second stream of household income. If you have a large earnings gap in the marriage, claiming at 6, the 2nd of May, unlock years of spousal benefits that would otherwise sit there unused, while everybody keeps repeating that the smart move is to wait. That is one of the reasons I dislike one-person calculators so much. They often miss the household picture entirely. Reason number 4. Your spouse has a serious or terminal health condition and a much higher benefit than you do. This is the most counterintuitive reason on the list, and in some cases it is one of the strongest here, is how it works. Suppose your spouse is the higher earner, but their life expectancy is likely to be shorter because of a serious diagnosis. You, the lower earner, can file for your own smaller benefit at 62 and collect it while your spouse is still alive. Then when your spouse passes away, you step up to the larger survivor benefit. That can be a very powerful move. Why? Because if you wait on your own benefit while your spouse is alive and then later step into the survivor benefit anyway, you may have left years of perfectly valid income uncollected. In that scenario, filing early is not impatience. It is rational sequencing. You collect what you can, now then later move to the bigger survivor benefit when the time comes. That is one of the clearest examples of why generic advice is often dangerous. The best move for a married couple with uneven health and uneven benefits can look completely different from the standard just delay mantra. Reason number 5, the stock market just crashed. This one is deeply underrated because most people think of Social Security only as a retirement income source, not as a portfolio management tool. But in a bad market, it can function as exactly that. Suppose you are retired, living off your investments, and the market drops 40% or 50%. Selling assets in that environment to fund spending can be brutal. You are liquidating depressed assets at exactly the wrong time and locking in damage that may be very hard to repair. Turning on Social Security early in that scenario can create a guaranteed income floor that reduces or eliminates the need to sell beaten-down assets. That is not weakness. That is strategy. And the flip side is equally interesting. If the market crashes before you have started drawing down heavily, you can file for Social Security and use the income to buy discounted assets while everyone else is panicking. That is not crazy. That is what rational capital allocation looks like in a stressed environment. So yes, a market crash can be a very good reason to revisit an early claim decision, especially if the alternative is forcing your portfolio to bleed at exactly the wrong moment. Reason number 6, taxes. More specifically, provisional income, the tax torpedo, and the timing of your low-income years. A lot of retirees do not realize that up to 85% of Social Security can become taxable once your income rises above certain thresholds. But the planning angle is what matters here. If you are in a low-income period right now, Maybe you have already retired. Maybe you are between work and required minimum distributions. Maybe your overall tax profile is unusually light. Then claiming Social Security in that period can be much less painful from a tax standpoint than claiming later when RMDs are piling on top of everything else. After age 73, your traditional retirement accounts begin forcing money out through required minimum distributions. Those withdrawals increase taxable income that can push more of your Social Security into the taxable range. If you claim earlier during a relatively low income window, you may collect years of benefits under a gentler tax picture before the forced distribution wave begins. In some cases, that makes early filing a tax management move, not a surrender move. Now, I am not saying that is always the winning strategy. In many cases, the golden window before Social Security and before RMDs is exactly when Roth conversions can be most valuable, and starting Social Security early can shrink that window. But the broader point still stands. Taxes are part of this decision. If your tax picture now is unusually favorable and your tax picture later is likely to be worse, that can be a real argument for filing earlier than the standard advice suggests. Reason number 7, you simply need the money. I want to say this one plainly and without the slightest bit of condescension. Life does not always cooperate with the neat retirement plan. Medical bills show up, a business fails, a pension disappears, a family member needs help, work becomes impossible. The entire point of Social Security is not to make people feel morally inferior for using it before an online forum says it is optimal. The whole point is to provide a foundational income stream when people need it. If you need it, you need it. That is not failure. That is the system doing the job it was designed to do. Now, let me make this more concrete with one household example, because this is where people start to see why early filing can be entirely rational in the right life. Take a woman I will call Sandra. She is 62, newly retired, married to a husband who is 65, has the larger Social Security benefit, and has a serious heart condition. Sandra's benefit at 62 is about $2,100 a month. Her husband's benefit at full retirement age will be about $3,600 a month. If Sandra waits until 67, her own benefit rises nicely. But if her husband dies at 69 and she switches to his survivor benefit anyway, the years she waited may have produced nothing except foregone income. If instead she files at 62, collects her own benefit for those years, and later steps into his larger survivor benefit, she may bring in a very large amount of money that would otherwise have gone unclaimed. That is not some loophole fantasy. That is exactly the kind of real world scenario generic advice fails to handle. Now, to be fair, there are absolutely many situations where waiting makes more sense. If you are healthy, financially strong, have a long life expectancy, no pressing need for the money, a spouse with a strong benefit of their own, and you value the larger inflation, adjusted check later, then delaying can be a beautiful move. In fact, when you model it correctly, delaying can look a lot like a very attractive guaranteed return, especially when you factor in COLA and longevity. So if you are asking me whether 62 or 70 is better, I will tell you that is the wrong question. The right question is this: which of these 7 conditions actually apply to your life right now? That is how you decide, not from Reddit, not from a one-size-fits all YouTube clip, not from an advisor who did not model your spouse, not from a calculator that assumes your life will unfold like a government average. You look at your health, you look at your spouse, you look at your tax picture, you look at your portfolio, you look at market conditions, you look at whether you need the income, and then you make the decision that fits your real situation instead of the situation a generic model wishes you had. Let me leave you with 3 practical takeaways. First, run the break. Even analysis, but do not worship it. Change the life expectancy assumptions by 3 years in either direction, then by 6, and see how much the recommendation moves. If a small change flips the answer, then the margin for error is thin and humility should go up. Second, if you are married, never analyze Social Security as though you live alone. Model the household, model spousal benefits, model survivor benefits. One spouse's filing decision can shape the other spouse's finances for years after death. Third, if you are in a low-income year facing a health issue or living through a major market decline, do not cling to a retirement filing plan that was built in calmer conditions. Reevaluate. Real life change, the plan may need to change with it. The government once had a break-even calculator on its website and took it down because people were misusing it. I understand why. People desperately want one clean answer to a messy problem, but this is not one of those decisions where clean always means correct. Sometimes the right move is to wait. Sometimes the right move is to file at 62. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop asking what the internet says is optimal and start asking what problem you are actually trying to solve. That is usually where the right answer begins.